I'm Gene Stillpine from No Nukes, Pennsylvania, and we're here today to present all the views of the citizens of Pennsylvania in regard to the reopening of 3 Mile Island, people who have lived through the accident way back, and also the current perspective on what's going on in regard to nuclear power, especially from TMI Unit 1. And today we have with us many different speakers. One of the leading speakers, I must say, is Mr. Eric Epstein, from the former chairman of 3 Mile Island Alert, and also who is currently one of the leading knowledgeable people on 3 Mile Island, whether it's Unit 2 or Unit 1. And also he is leading in the opposition to Susquehanna nuclear power up the road here, and also to Peach Bottom down the river. And so if there's one person who's trying to save the Susquehanna, it's Eric Epstein. So I'm going to introduce Eric right now, and then we're going to go on to other speakers. Eric?
All right. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody. I also want to welcome the Nuclear Caucus and people from the nuclear industry. In fact, that's one of the reasons we're here, is to flesh out and have an open discussion on the restart of 3 Mile Island. To date, all the discussions have happened behind closed doors. So just want to remind people some history, which it seems like folks forget. It wasn't that long ago that Pennsylvanians approved deregulation and embraced the marketplace, and it wasn't that long ago that TMI lost $300 million over 8 years, and it wasn't that long ago that the nuclear utilities received $9 billion in bailouts. Part of those bailouts were to help nuclear power transition to the marketplace. The market has spoken, but the politicians aren't listening. To give you a financial overview of what we're looking at, is to restart TMI would be anywhere between $1.5 and $1.8 billion. That money would come from federal and state sources. That's based on what's being used right now to bail out Palisades in Michigan. So put those numbers together. You got a plant built in '74 with 1960s technology getting bailed out for perhaps 10, 20 years at the most. Excuse me. Look, let's be realistic. The people that want to restart TMI are formidable. The president, the governor, the legislature, organized labor, and the No Nuclear Caucus. We, the citizens, are, I think, really embody the will of the voters and the citizens. You have to remember, again, going back in time, in 1982, we voted by a 2-to-1 margin to shut 3 Mile Island in a non-binding referendum in Dauphin, Cumberland, and Lebanon County. So we're here to make sure the will of the folks is upheld. There's always two threads that come with a nuclear bailout. The first is that an acknowledgement that nuclear can't compete on the marketplace, and ratepayers and taxpayers get higher bills. So there's been 3 bailouts at TMI. Just again, hopefully give you some context. TMI 2 experienced a core melt accident after 90 days of operation. 90 days. Ratepayers and taxpayers came to the rescue. In fact, some of the people at this podium, including myself, helped support a bailout at TMI. At the time TMI was built, there was no decommissioning fund because the industry said this kind of accident was impossible. So think about that when you get guarantees from the industry. It's like getting a guarantee from the Pinto that their child seat is well. So when you look at this, in terms of, I guess, a financial perspective, TMI pays no taxes, TMI 2. They reduced their insurance coverage and they have no emergency plan. The second bailout came in 1995. Okay, I was told to slow down by my dad. So the first bailout was to defuel TMI. It was known as the Thornburg Plan. It was $978 million. The second bailout was for about $1.2 billion because the plant was built before decommissioning fund. Even though the plant operated for 90 days, we got the bill, $1.3 billion. It's $1.3 billion. So $2.2 billion into defueling, cleaning up a plant. Remember, TMI 2 is not cleaned up. It's defueled. And to make this episode even more risky, if TMI 1 restarts, it would be next to TMI 2, a high-level radioactive waste site. The third bailout was through the Pennsylvania legislature, the Consumer Choice Act. The nuclear utilities received $9 billion. $9 billion. That money was meant to help these utilities who became private corporations transition into the new marketplace. So what we're looking at, just the final price tag before we even think about TMI-2. TMI-1 cost $400 million to build. TMI-2 cost $700 million to build. TMI-2 was 5 years behind schedule and 2.5 years behind budget. When you factor the cost to ratepayers paid to build the plants, we're at $3.357 billion. So if we do nothing, that's what ratepayers and taxpayers have into this adventure. 700 tons of high-level radioactive waste at TMI, nowhere to go. TMI-2 is a high-level radioactive waste site. There hasn't been a human entry in the basement in 45 years. This is a lethal technology. This is not pure, clean, and green. If nuclear is green, then spinach, then sewage is spinach. I mean, it's pretty remarkable that we're even here. So let me just conclude by saying, paying it forward doesn't mean piling up more radioactive garbage for your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren, and your great-great-great-grandchildren. There's an ethical dilemma here. You're creating a waste that has nowhere to go and which your children will have to monitor. In the real world, when you create a catastrophe, you aren't bailed out and given a tax-free mulligan. So my message to the community and to the people who want to restart TMI, first things first. Let's clean up the plant you melted down 45 years ago. Okay, thanks, Dad.
Here's what the future is. The future of this area is. This is Amari, okay? The grandchild of a buddy of mine and his wife. He's a beautiful guy. And if we're lucky, he'll give his opinion on 3 Mile Island by spitting up, okay? Okay, Amari? Okay, buddy? Okay. Here you go, Dad. Thanks, Amari. The quick point Eric made is this. The taxpayers and ratepayers of Pennsylvania should not have to pay for a corporation, Constellation Energy, from another state, from another world, that doesn't have anything to do with us, all right? Taxpayers and ratepayers should not pay for Constellation Energy, who has all that waste down there. I've changed their name to Constipation Energy because they're constipated with waste. Especially if those clean energy guys in the back, they don't even know what clean energy is. Anyhow, the bottom line is this, all right? We're fighting to make sure the people, the ratepayers and taxpayers, are not charged for something that they have nothing to do with, all right? Next is Tim Judson, the Nuclear Information and Resource Service in Washington, D.C., and also around the world, one of the leading battlers against nuclear power worldwide, and also knows 3 Mile Island very well. They were here from the first days on years ago, and they keep on fighting. So Tim is the executive director. He's kindly come up from Washington, D.C. today. So Tim, thank you so much for coming.
Great. Thanks, Gene. So the last time I had the pleasure of being in the rotunda here was 5 years ago on the 40th anniversary of the meltdown at 3 Mile Island. And we were here then not just to commemorate the anniversary and to honor the lives that have been lost since then, but also because there was a proposal to bail out the nuclear plants in Pennsylvania with legislation that was before the legislature then. Would have been a $1 billion a year bailout for the existing reactors in the state. And Exelon and First Energy were lobbying like crazy for it by saying that that the nuclear plants were gonna close all across the state unless the ratepayers had to fork out another $1 billion a year to subsidize them. Luckily, the legislature saw reason and didn't do that. And 5 years later, the only reactor to close in Pennsylvania without a bailout was 3 Mile Island Unit 1. And it was allowed to close because there was no need for the electricity. The PJM grid operator decided that the TMI could close and it wouldn't cause any power shortages. There's plenty of power on the grid. And that hasn't changed. But the reasons why TMI closed are really important. And that is, as Eric mentioned already, that it was an extremely unprofitable nuclear power plant, and that was for good reason. It was 45 years old. It's smaller than your average nuclear plant, and operating costs were higher, and it couldn't make money. And that hasn't changed either. So, the reality is that, so now we're here 5 years later, and, I wish I was a stand-up comedian because we could do a great routine about this. But I guess the reason I'm here today is to give you some reasons why this should be a joke to restart TMI. The reality is that what's being proposed to restart TMI is completely unprecedented. We've never restarted a retired nuclear power plant in the US, and for good reason. When TMI retired in 2019, 3 weeks later, Exelon certified that it had defueled the reactor. And at that point, the plant lost its operating license. We don't let reactors restart after they've been defueled and put into decommissioning. And now it's been 5 years that this plant has been sitting, degrading. So this is like, if you'd driven your dad's 74 Impala for 45 years and then decided to take it off the road because it was too expensive to maintain it, and then 5 years later you're going to put it back on the road? How much is that going to cost you? Who's going to drive it? Who wants to drive it? Constellation is not going to restart this reactor on its own dime. It's going to require the state and the federal government to come forward with billions of dollars to do it. As Eric mentioned, the current proposal to restart the Palisades reactor, which closed in 2022, is already expected to cost at least $1.8 billion, with $1.5 billion forgivable loan from the federal government and $300 million from the state. The only other similar proposal that's ever happened before was the restart of a reactor in Alabama that had been mothballed for 20 years. That cost nearly $3 billion in today's dollars. Since we've never brought a reactor out of retirement before, we don't know how much it's going to cost. But you can bet that it's not going to be Constellation that's going to pay for it. And the reality is that there is no need for TMI to be restarted. We're going to be told that electricity demand is going up, that we've got all sorts of data centers and artificial intelligence that needs the power. The reality is that there are 250 gigawatts of renewable energy and storage projects awaiting approval by PJM that could interconnect within the next 5 years. That's the equivalent of 300 Three Mile Islands worth of electricity. It's more than the entire capacity of the entire PJM grid right now. There is no shortage of ways to replace this power without billions of dollars in subsidies from federal and state ratepayers and taxpayers to cover it. What has changed is that the same company would not be operating Three Mile Island that was operating it before. In 2022, Exelon spun off its entire nuclear energy business to a separate company that's now called Constellation. So if running nuclear power plants was such a great idea, then why did Exelon, the largest nuclear power company in the country, get out of the business completely and hand it off to an untested corporation? Constellation's entire business model is running old nuclear power plants with federal and state subsidies. The only way that the Constellation is going to do this is if the state guarantees at least $100 million a year in subsidies, in addition to the cost of what it's going to take to restart the plant. There's no need for this. The plant doesn't have water permits to use the Susquehanna River anymore, and there's no need for the power. And so, what we're really looking at is taking an old reactor that's been degrading for 5 years and trying to bring it back online, which is really dangerous. And so for those reasons, we should really be laughing about this proposal, but to restart TMI, we should be moving on with the 250 gigawatts of renewable energy and storage that's ready to be brought online in PJM, and that could power everything that we need to be concerned about. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
I think you're getting the message here. No restart. The group here, do you believe in restart? No. Okay. Next, we have people who are very familiar with 3 Mile Island. Recently, the women in front here, 3 of these women here, Paula, Joyce, and Beth, and a 4th one, who's not here today, Linda, were the stars of the award-winning documentary, Radioactivity, The Women of 3 Mile Island. And so they're going to share their story here right now with you. And so, ladies, please take over here.
Hello, my name is Joyce Karate. This is Paula Kenny, Beth Drasba, and Linda Brash was not able to be with us today. We are Concerned Mothers and Women. We have been an organization for over 40-some years. We live in the local community, and our interest is in the safety of this plant. We, as concerned mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers and women, find that issue of 3 Mile Island possible restart totally unacceptable. TMI not only had an accident, which is still not cleaned up, with the waste sitting on a floodplain under an international airport without the money, expertise, and the will of the owners to clean it up for over 45 years. This is not a pro or an anti-nuclear issue to us. It is a health and safety issue. We repeat, it is a health and safety issue, period. We cannot and will not accept the restart of the wounded and distressed plant. We have totally had our trust in the Congress, in the companies, that have owned the plant over the years, and the NRC, who has mandated to protect the health and safety of the public, have totally sold us out. Okay, Paul?
The fallacy of clean, safe, and economical energy is overshadowed by the inability to handle contaminated waste and exposure of lethal materials. The restart cost of a plant in Michigan was $1.5 billion in federal dollars and $300 million in state money. How economical would it be to restart 3 Mile Island where there's been an accident? We're not going away. I can't believe that we're still here today. We have a moral obligation to fight for the health and safety of everyone. We will never quit until it is cleaned up and permanently closed. For a better understanding of our 45-year TMI journey, we ask you to view Radioactive, The Women of 3 Mile Island on Prime or Apple Plus. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.
We got the hot chicks.
Scott's Porch Line has been a continuous voice of reason for safety at 3 Mile Island, and also, how should I say it, always leading in good investigations, all right? And okay, I'm going to let him finish his introduction because he knows more about than I am, and I don't have my glasses on. I apologize, Scott.
No, here it is in large print.
Large print, okay. Scott, go for it.
Okay. Thank you, Gene.
Hey, Scott.
And thank you, Eric. Part of the reason I'm here is because of my memory of the details of the 1979 meltdown. Some of those which have been forgotten and are unknown to the NRC, which allowed for a safety defect to occur without them knowing, and I discovered. So that's what I'm here to talk about. An evaluation of the performance and design of the replacement steam generators at Unit 1 show that there's a dangerous flaw. The data indicates that under transient reactor conditions, the new steam generators can self-destruct from the fluttering of its internal steam tubes. What happens is the fluttering causes some of the steam tubes to rub together and to bang into each other, thereby creating wear and damage to the tube walls. This is, if you can see that okay, what that looks like. I'll hold it here for another 30 seconds or so.
How thin are they?
I don't know they're very thin. They're thousandths of an inch thin. And the tubes themselves are about the diameter of a dime. I'll get in a little more detail on the steam tubes themselves in a minute here. Okay, so it jeopardizes the integrity of the steam generators, and this problem was created by a new and aggressive design instead of conservative design, which placed the more than 15,000 steam tubes closer together than in the previous design. Now, rupturing steam tubes can cause a loss of coolant accident. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission reports that the rupture of the steam tubes can, quote, result in a containment bypass event, where a large release of fission products to the environment, end quote, can occur. Of course, that means radiation release. During a reactor transient, higher than normal temperatures would risk fracturing the steam tubes due to an intensified severity of the fluttering that I have unveiled the dangers with. During accident conditions, the failure of these steam tubes would allow radiation to escape from the reactor and create a pathway to the environment. Thus, the classification of this scenario as a containment bypass event, and a containment bypass accident is the most dangerous of all nuclear accidents because radiation comes pouring out of the plant. An NRC report states, quote, "Indeed, some of the most severe releases arise from some containment bypass events, such as the rupturing of multiple steam generator tubes," and that's what we're talking about. Again, the data shows that the higher the temperature, the more the steam tubes will bow and flutter. Can somebody hand me that tube in my briefcase over there, please?
That sounds like a setup question.
Yes, thank you. Had to get special permission to bring a club-like object into the Capitol, so I called in advance. What is happening, these are about 56 feet tall. There's 15,000 of these tubes, and they're under compression from the end. When they heat up, they swell, and then they can bow. And when they bow, they can flutter and bang into each other, causing that wear that I was showing you on that drawing. Additionally, during a reactor transient, the fluttering is made worse by the increasing hydrodynamic chaos within the steam generators. Our contention is, and the problem is, this condition has not been analyzed by the NRC and represents a violation of the licensing process. Behind the scenes, I did talk with the NRC officials who agreed with me that the condition must be analyzed. Any nuclear company or utility that tries to restart Unit 1 will face a heavy financial burden and possibly years of delay should the NRC rule that the steam generators are not licensable. When Eric and I took our challenge before the NRC in a petition for enforcement action, the NRC refused to answer our questions and would not and could not point to the specific paragraphs in the reports which supposedly backed their contentions that the condition had been properly scrutinized. This is not how one proffers scientific testimony. Furthermore, I'm almost finished here. Furthermore, the NRC panel showed an embarrassing unfamiliarity with the details of our assertions. This was proof to us that they could not have watched the computer animation we created to explain the fluttering problem. That, by the way, you can see on YouTube. Just do a search for steam generators TMI. It's about a 3-minute video and very, very clear. It'll tell you what's going on. Without the ability to challenge the NRC's statements, we were unjustifiably shut out of the process for public intervention regarding safety issues at nuclear plants. And that is why we are prepared and look forward contesting this issue before the Atomic Safety and Licensing Board, where administrative judges and legal proceedings will allow for a proper hearing. I want to give a footnote here. There was a similar steam generator problem at the San Onofre nuclear plant in California with its steam generators, and a citizen group did intervene and had to take their contentions to the Atomic Licensing Board. The group was found to be correct, and the board ruled in their favor. The plant ended up shut down because the expense to correct the problem would have been too high. And that covers it.
Thank you, Scott. Ladies, if we can move about 4 feet that way so they can see the sign here. So they can see the sign. This is the story right here. This is the story right here of what happened at 3 Mile Island, right there. There was a meltdown. There was a meltdown. There was a vote to keep it shut. And what's going to happen here is that you folks out there who are taping this today or listening are getting a master class from activists in what has to happen, in what's going to happen in the coming years as Constellation, or I should say Constipation Energy, tries to turn this plant back on. We're not going to let the state give them any money. We're not going to let the legislature give them any money, I should say. We're not going to let the NRC, if you will, and their whole fake processes, we're not going to let them how should I say it, give Constellation Energy a easy time of it. We're going to make sure in the courts, in the streets, in the legislature, we're going to fight them. There's not going to be one dime of Pennsylvania money spent on Constellation Energy's bad dream. We're not going to resurrect the Edsel and give them the right to drive it. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to, who is next here? Who is next here? Holly's next, right here, Holly, okay? Cumberland County speaks right here through a young lady named Holly Sebastian. Okay, Holly? Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, good morning. Previously, I did not speak publicly about this, but in recent years, corporations have pushed to weaken or eliminate government regulations for their own benefit. Corporations repeatedly test the authority of many government agencies at the expense of our safety. In 1984, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in the Chevron decision that any undetailed or ambiguous regulations should be interpreted by certified government experts. Corporations won a huge victory 3 months ago in June when this decision was overturned. Now, judges and others who have no expertise can make decisions when corporations challenge regulations. These judges are not required to know anything about scientific facts. The decision to start Unit 1 could be made by unqualified people who have no requirements to know about nuclear power or our safety. With this in mind, we can no longer trust that those who want to restart TMI will have and will follow regulations. This endangers the citizens who live nearby. We don't know that any agency is watching out for us. The corporate bottom line is profit. The corporation values money over risk of harm to this community. The possibility of their future long-term liability is not their concern. There are many reasons not to restart TMI, but nothing is more important than the fact that no one involved in the restart can guarantee safety for us or future generations. They should never gamble with the safety and wellness of our loved ones or our community. We want to be safe now and in the future. Our families and our children deserve to be safe.
Thank you. All right. I just want a couple clarifications. The steam generator tube presentation, which is on YouTube, will distill in 3 minutes the problem with the fluttering. So what we're saying is we have a structural problem that needs to be addressed. That problem shut down San Onofre. So this is a serious, serious issue. The other thing I wanted to point out, this is being streamed on Rock the Capitol and on Facebook. I also wanted to thank everybody for the media for coming out. We still got a little more to come.
The film that the ladies were a subject of, radioactivity, the women of 3 Mile Island, the director just sent us a message from New England, from her college. Heidi Hutner is her name, the movie I mentioned before. Here's her message she just sent. Here's what she has to say. She says, "Don't do it. Do not restart 3 Mile Island. 40 years plus of nuclear waste on the island. Families riddled with cancer. Families who were never fairly compensated, helped, or had their needs and concerns addressed. The corrupt nuclear industry is pushing for nuclear power because it will line their pockets with taxpayer dollars. They hoodwinked our politicians and policymakers and somehow convinced them that nuclear power is safe, and indeed it is not. Nuclear is not clean or safe and is not the solution to climate change. It cannot solve our energy problems. The answer is geothermal, wind, solar, hydropower, and they're 5 times less expensive. The waste of that island will remain lethal for up to 1 million years. So please stop nuclear power." Thank you, Heidi. The last person is Diane Diorigo. She is a waste coordinator internationally for Nuclear Information Resource Service. And I'm going to read her statement she had to send up. Since 3 Mile Island reactors, no nuclear waste has been made there. This is the first step to responsible nuclear waste management. Stop making it. But the waste is already there. It's a huge challenge. It cannot be completely isolated from the environment, the river, the air, the fish, and the water. In addition to the containment reactor itself and the radioactive soil of the island, there is an enormous amount of intensely radioactive, very long-lasting spent fuel. It is in dry casks designed to last 50 years, with vents exhaling radioactivity into the air. There will be more than 50 casks from TMI Unit 1 and Unit 2 sitting on the island indefinitely. The bottom line is what? Did I miss any speakers? Did I miss anybody? No. Okay. We have any questions from the press? Thank you so much. Yes, sir. Channel 21.
For decades.
Right.
After the meltdown restarted, now we're looking at a renewed need for energy and stuff like that. Why, after so many decades of operating safely, should we not look at bringing it back up?
Tim and Eric will answer that.
All right. So TMI-1 came online in 1974. It's 1960s technology, Babcock and Wilcox reactor. 4 out of the 8 Babcock reactor designs are shut down, so there's an inherent fault. It did operate for a period of time, from 74 to 79, and then it was closed from 79 to 85. We have embraced what we were challenged to do, provide alternatives and let the marketplace decide the technology. So you're retrofitting an Edsel. I mean, I think it was said earlier, there are other technologies. And look, the PGM market has a capacity of between 20 and 22%. This is all about data. This is just what happened up in Susquehanna, where you had a data center from Amazon married to Susquehanna. It'll take up to 960 megawatts, which is 150 more than TMI. This is a power grab. It's about money and it's about data centers. So the question is, I'm not really comfortable with the 1960s technology being restarted with my money. Again, I think I illustrated $400 million to build, 700 for TMI2, 1.1 billion. We've got 3.3 billion into this. So I think there's a more efficient and a safer way to generate energy, but the myth that we need the energy is not true. The fact of the matter is, this is all about, and I think it's likely if TMI restarts, marrying a data center, which means it takes energy off the grid, and the data centers don't pay for just distribution or transmission. They're behind the meters. So starting TMI will cost a lot of money. The recipient will be a data center that takes energy off the grid, and your rates will go up. So I think for those reasons, it's a good reason to let it stay where it is. By the way, I just want to point out, they have 47 casks on TMI-1, 700 metric tons of high-level waste. They have no more storage room. They have no workers. They have no water. I'm not saying they can't get over this. You know, money always makes things happen. This is a heavy haul. What would be a better investment for our money? That's the question we should be asking. And we were told, let the marketplace decide. Market decided, and they decided it's not nuclear.
PJM is saying the marketplace has a problem moving forward, however. We're not generating enough power for the anticipated demand. And in many of the states, not Pennsylvania, many of the states are actually renewable requirements that in certain circumstances aren't going to provide the necessary power. That's the genesis to even looking back at more nuclear. What's your response to that? We need to turn the lights on. We need to heat the house.
Yeah, I think the response is pretty clear. There's a demand for energy largely driven by data centers, and that's correct. I think PJM fails to disclose, as Tim did, we have gigawatts of energy waiting to hook up to the grid. The issue isn't if we have the energy. The issue is, why is it taking so long to hook up? For renewables, maybe 18 to 20% make it through. So I think PJM is going to have to take a hard look at itself. Their decision to approve the nuclear Amazon deal is being appealed. But look, nobody's going to disagree that there's going to be more demand. The other problem that nobody's looking at is we export 30% of our energy. So for homegrown, keep the energy homegrown. New York, which doesn't frack, gets a lot of electricity from gas stations here. So I fundamentally disagree with the premise of PJM, and I think PJM, and I'll be frank, needs to do a much better job of hooking up generation. We have the generation. By the way, if TMI opens, just like up at Susquehanna, it'll leapfrog the queue. PJM will let it go to the front of the line where all the other energy technologies are in the back of the line. Tim, can you follow up? You're better looking.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just to underscore what Eric said, and as I mentioned in my comments, there's 250 gigawatts of renewable energy and storage projects waiting for permission to connect to the grid in PJM. And that's 300 times as much generation capacity as 3 Mile Island Unit 1 has. So it's not, the PJM definitely has problems with approving projects as quickly as they should, so that projects get canceled because they're sitting around waiting too long to get approved. But the idea that the Constellation is going to get to jump the queue in front of all of these hundreds of gigawatts of renewable energy projects, is fundamentally unfair to the market. But the other part of the question that's sort of that kind of misses the point is that TMI isn't just going to turn on overnight. It's going to take 2 to 3 years to refit the plant and to get the licensing approvals necessary to restart it and to rehire the whole workforce. So this isn't going to happen overnight. And so if that we should be really focused on how do we get PJM approving interconnections so that we can bring the renewable energy capacity that's already in the queue online, and not have a misfired conversation about restarting an old nuclear reactor that was never economical to begin with.
Gene, can I say something?
Sure. Hold the baby. Take the baby out.
Hello, my name's Daniel Welliver. I want to speak to that same question. I'm a landowner in Perry County, and I would happily and explored happily donating a 15-acre plot for a community solar development project. The problem was that 3-phase electricity from the grid was a mile away from my land. It would cost $1 million to get 3-phase electricity there so I could provide solar energy for myself and my neighbors in Perry County. So if we're going to spend money to subsidize energy, why not start building out our grids so that it can handle more solar and wind power? This little guy is Omari. He's here. I'm speaking for him today as well. He's a grandchild. I don't want Omari to be saddled with all of the problems that we've created for him with nuclear waste, with climate change, with wars taking place around the world. So for Omari's sake, I'll keep speaking out against TMI restart. Thank you.
That's got it. I guess Amari's not speaking.
By the way, it's going to take more than three to 5 years to turn that on. We'll keep them tied up in court forever. If they want jobs, take the freaking cooling towers down. Remove the cooling towers from the site. The people of central Pennsylvania, take them down. The other thing too is remember this. Not one dime of Pennsylvania taxpayer money, ratepayer money is going to be spent to bail out Constellation Energy and give Constellation Energy any money at all. Who says they spend money here? Maybe that money goes into the whole corporate network of Constellation Energy. We don't know what controls are there. But anyhow, what's that? Yep. Any more questions? By the way, the people who are young here, young reporters, et cetera, PJM is Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland grid. All right, that's what that stands for. Anybody else? Questions? Robert?
Surfaces in the state legislature, in what form do you think the aid proponents would try to get the aid available in this?
You're wondering what form the aid will take place if the state legislature does anything. Eric, you want to respond to that? Go ahead.
So, we're operating off the model in Palisades, Michigan, which was an 800 megawatt plant, power pressurized water reactor, 50 years old. By the way, it did not perform well. TMI did. I think the mechanism, and we saw this before in the bailout bill, is either going to be a direct subsidy or credit for their energy. I think the industry wants to be part of the alternative energy portfolio where they're further subsidized. So you can ask the Nuclear Caucus. Tom Mahaffey is here. There's a couple people here from Constellation. I'm sure you will. But where we've been from the beginning is let the market decide. The amount of subsidies that are pouring into the industry is just incredible. So I don't know it really matters, RB, what the vehicle is. What it really matters is how much is it going to be. At Palisades in Michigan, it was $300 million. So with the 1.5 billion from the federal government, we're going to spend 1.8 billion to restart a nuclear plant that's 50 years old. And if we're going to do that, one of the things perhaps we should have is a referendum. We had a referendum in '82. We voted to shut the plant down. So it's exasperating, but Tom Mahaffey's here, and I'm sure he can articulate what the plan is, whatever it is. And part of the problem is this discussion before has all happened behind closed doors and in the dark. Let's flush it out so that when you ask that question, you can have a legislator answer it. The final thing I wanted to point out, if you go to the Pennsylvania DEP website, or if you go to the Nuclear Caucus websites, which are paid for by taxpayers, none of this information will be here. If you go to the DEP website and the Pennsylvania Caucus, which we pay for, they're promotional websites. So I would hope that questions like that could be answered where they would tell us how they're going to do it. Is that satisfactory, or did I meander too much? All right.
One of the crucial, I'm sorry, yes? Question? You have a question?
You've talked a lot about letting the market decide what power should, but renewables need a lot of incentives to get off the ground.
Right.
Do you object to those incentives? If the market decides right now, the market has decided, with also help from policy, that natural gas is sort of our dominant energy
Right.
which presents a climate change issue.
As does nuclear.
As does coal.
Yeah, let me just respond to that. So every source of energy enjoys some kind of subsidy. The issue with nuclear is, for instance, whether you like or dislike gas, private equity is building gas plants. There's never been $1 of private investment in the nuclear industry. So the subsidy that I'm looking at is coming from the ratepayers, and we tend not to look at it. So these plants, every one across the country, including Vogtle, which was just built, what was it, 8 billion over? 21 billion over, ratepayer money. So that's the subsidy. Solar doesn't get that kind of subsidy and wind doesn't. But we can say, yeah, everybody enjoys some help, some assistance. I would also point out that the nuclear waste tariff that we all paid as ratepayers, we all paid. The industry hasn't put $1 into nuclear waste management. So what they're getting, and this is an example, TMI-1, through a settlement with the Department of Treasury, gets $300 million every 5 years to babysit TMI. So by doing nothing, they make money. Every utility in the country, every corporation has sued the DOE saying, hey, you failed to find a waste site, you pay us. So from the birth of nuclear to its alleged death, that's a ton. We're talking trillions of dollars. So I think it's fair to acknowledge other sources do get the funds. Whether you like or don't like natural gas, that is purely an entrepreneurial enterprise. Nuclear, if left to the market, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Tim, if you want to say.
One of the crucial things here is commercial. Okay, way back 3 Mile Island. When 3 Mile Island happened the first time, who would be the most destructive commercially? Who would not benefit commercially if 3 Mile Island was even worse? One of the biggest corporations here is Hershey Foods. Hershey Foods would have been ruined. All right, ruined. But also all the farmers in Pennsylvania, the agriculture industry ruined. All right. So now we have a farmer here from Patty Longacre, who's been anti-nuclear for 45 years. She's going to give her view. 35-acre farm from Lancaster County, Patty Longacre. Here's our problem here.
Can you hear it?
Hold on for a second.
Oh man, that's high tech.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There we go. Pretty good, huh? Okay.
I'd like to bring a positive note to something this serious. In the early 70s, we were all optimistic. We were looking at the Clean Air Act. Our mantra became, we all live downstream. 45, then 46 and a half years ago, we now look to when no one realized how important it was for those of us who live downstream, for the people who care for the animals, for the crops, the seriousness of what a technology out of control wreaked on our area. Worldwide, no matter where you traveled, people were asking where you lived, are you radioactive, and another slogan evolved, "We all live in Pennsylvania." So yes, we all do live downstream of some kind of pollution, but hopefully this group and all of you people reporting on this event, this many, over 4 decades later, will make change. Hopefully our Governor Shapiro will be listening. Hopefully the NRC will begin to have open doors again to hear our concerns and know we are not here as political advocates, but environmental advocates for all of our humanity. A clean energy future will boost this economy and our public health. May we hope for a new political climate when just not in April, but every day will become Earth Day. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. And all these people here, we're going to volunteer to come down to the farm and help you on the harvest this year, because it's going to come in soon. Any more questions out there? Okay. Activists, I'd like you all to stay right here for a group picture. Can we do that? All right. So gather in closer, okay, now. We want to thank you all for coming. This is the first of many, if you will, discussions on nuclear power. And guess what? If you want to find out who's supporting the industry, just go to the donation site and you can see what legislators are getting money and being bought off by the nuclear industry. All right? So thank you so much.